We imagine business as a game of chess, where executives outmaneuver rivals. But in perfect competition, individual strategy is mathematically meaningless. This environment relies on two strict conditions. First, the products must be completely homogeneous. Every unit is identical. Second, there must be a number of buyers and sellers so vast that no single participant commands enough market share to matter. The model tightens the parameters further with two final constraints: perfect mobility of resources to move wherever they are needed, and perfect knowledge, meaning every consumer and firm knows exactly what the present and future prices are. Because of these rules, the aggregate reality of the market is ironclad. If one firm doubles its output or halves it, the total supply shifts by a fraction so microscopic that the overarching commodity price doesn't budge. Every firm in this model is strictly a price taker. In perfect competition, survival is not about outsmarting the market. It is about absolute submission to an externally dictated price. The price itself is forged at the macro level, precisely at the equilibrium point where aggregate market supply meets aggregate market demand. Macro equilibrium creates a rigid boundary here. The market intersection projects directly to the firm as a dashed fixed baseline. This infinitely elastic demand curve is locked at exactly $8. The firm can sell any quantity, but only at that specific price. If the firm asks for $8.01, their sales drop to zero. Perfect knowledge means consumers instantly walk away to buy the exact same good from a competitor. Conversely, dropping the price to $7.99 is completely irrational. The firm can already sell infinite units at the $8 market rate, so offering a discount just destroys revenue for no gain. Stripped of all pricing power, the firm is left with only a single variable they can actually control: the quantity of their output. The horizontal demand curve acts as a mathematical leash, restricting the firm's agency to one relentless optimization problem of volume. To solve for volume, we have to look inside the internal cost structures of the firm. The calculation hinges on two variables: marginal revenue, the money gained from selling one more unit, and marginal cost, the expense of making it. This graph maps optimization. Profit maximizes exactly where the flat marginal revenue line intersects the U-shaped marginal cost curve. Crucially, at point D', marginal cost must be rising. The data proves this. At 650 units, total profits peak. But producing past this point is self-destructive. If the firm makes a 651st unit, the cost to build it is higher than the $8 it sells for. It actively eats into the profit built by previous units. And stopping early at 600 units means walking away from goods that cost less to make than the market is willing to pay. It just leaves money on the table. The firm's engine of survival relies on a simple algorithm: accelerate production until the cost of the next unit hits the price ceiling, then stop. But optimizing output volume does not guarantee the firm is actually making a profit. It only guarantees they are making the best choice available. To measure actual viability, we have to introduce two new curves to the model: average cost and average variable cost. This chart lays out the scenarios. At point A, price yields positive profit. At point B, the firm breaks even. Counterintuitively, at point C, price sits entirely below average cost. The firm loses money, yet rationality dictates they stay open. As long as the price covers the average variable cost, the raw materials and hourly wages, the firm minimizes its total losses. The revenue pays off the variables, leaving a little left over to chip away at fixed costs. The threshold of death sits slightly lower at point F, the minimum of the average variable cost curve. The data confirms, below this point, the firm cannot afford basic raw materials. Producing actively accelerates their deficit. A firm will hemorrhage money to survive a market downturn, but it will only die when it can no longer afford physical inputs to produce. Look at panel A. Because a firm always produces exactly where price equals marginal cost, that rising, bolded segment of the curve above the shutdown point is in fact that firm's individual supply curve. To find total market supply, we perform a horizontal summation, adding together the exact output volume of every identical firm at each successive price point. Panel B scales this up. The steep industry supply curve is simply the synchronized output of 100 identical firms reacting to the same data. Market supply is the synchronized mathematical shadow cast by thousands of identical firms following the same marginal rules. Shift the timeline to the long run. Now leases expire, factories can be expanded, all costs become variable, and the barrier to entry vanishes entirely. Any economic profit generated in the short run acts as a blinding beacon. It attracts outside capital, drawing in new competitors, until the market is flooded with identical firms. This influx shifts the market supply curve outward, creating a volume glut that drives the equilibrium price down. This chart captures the final mechanism of the long-run squeeze. The market price is compressed downward until it hits point E, the absolute lowest valley of the long-run average cost curve. At this precise coordinate, all pure economic profit is eradicated. The firms generate just enough revenue to cover their opportunity costs, leaving zero incentive for new competitors to enter and zero reason for current firms to leave. Success in perfect competition is its own undoing. The system weaponizes the pursuit of profit to drive market prices down to the absolute minimum cost of existence. So what happens if consumer demand grows permanently? Does the long-run price stay at that exact floor forever? The answer depends entirely on factor prices, the raw cost of the labor, steel, and land required to build the goods. In a constant cost industry, raw materials are abundant. No matter how many new firms enter to meet rising demand, input prices stay stable, creating a perfectly horizontal long-run supply curve. But contrast that with an increasing cost industry. Here, rapid expansion creates a bidding war for scarce resources. The price of lumber or specialized labor spikes for everyone. These rising factor prices force the internal cost curves of every single firm upward. It physically costs more to survive. The macro result is a positively sloped long-run industry supply curve. Greater output volumes can only be sustained at permanently higher prices. The physical limits and resource costs of growth dictate the final trajectory of an entire industry.